Right, welcome everyone to our Bicep community call of July 2022. I'll go through these next few slides pretty quickly. This is the team. I'm sure you've seen them every call, and they're always in the chat answering questions. Our core maintainers, again, we really appreciate all of these maintainers. All of you guys have been contributing so much, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate you. We can't tell you enough. And our interns. So this is the last call all of our interns are going to be in before they go back to school. So they have a really great demo and presentation that they would like to share you. So any support and all support is welcome. We're so proud of our interns for putting in the work that they have this summer. So what is the community call for? It's for you guys, not us. It is for us sometimes for feedback, but we want to share all the updates that you otherwise wouldn't know. So please be extra active in the chat because we will answer all your questions. We have engineering managers here, we have engineers, we have PMs. Yeah, again, use the chat. If you would have any questions, please raise your hands. We will take all questions at the end as well for questions and answers. But if you have any questions for what is on the slide at the moment, please raise your hands and we'll try to answer. All right, so the V0.9 release. So we have gotten some stuff in. It's been slower this month because it is the start of summer. People are, at least summer in the United States, people are going on trips. So it's been fun, but what we've been doing is the ARM-TTK rule parity in the Bicep linter. This is something that one of our engineers, Stephen Weatherford, has been working on. So artifacts, parameters, and secure secrets and params are things that the rules that have been released for this month. The plan is to have the rest of the rules released at V0.10, which will be next month. I'll put in the chat what we have for artifacts parameters, or if someone else can do that. On the different rules that have been implemented, and secure secrets and params, basically it will flag if the secret is not secure. Unused existing resources rule. This is something that one of our external contributors, Alex Angos, had contributed, and we are super grateful for our external contributors. This finds existing resources that aren't referenced anywhere in the Bicep file and allows you to delete the resource defined if not used. Deprecation to providers function. I believe we introduced that last month, but we are deprecating this in the next release. Please use the chat and tell us if you don't want providers to, function to be deprecated, or if that's going to fail any of your current templates, and we could work through that. Yeah, that's our plan. Yes,
Stephanie, for that one, it'd be great if they could add the comments to the issue, and I'll dig it up. And oh, never mind, Anthony already did.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Anthony. All right, future releases. So for August, V0.10, preview of Kubernetes provider. I'm not sure, Anthony, if that is still going on, but I believe that's true. Various Bicep decompile workflow improvements, build and decompile APIs, and VS Bicep support. So we previously had plans for the VS Bicep support to be released this month, but we had some things that we wanted to make sure it was top quality for all of our customers. And so we are planning to release that next month. And Bhavya, our engineer, has been working on this and doing an amazing job, putting so much time and effort. And she will talk more about that next call. So please get excited. I am very excited because a lot of our customers do use Visual Studio versus Visual Studio Code. V0.10 to be determined on what we will be adding, but we have a new way of tracking our tasks in the Bicep projects. If you go to the repo, you can go see the projects. It's a new GitHub feature that we are using, and it's really great. And yeah, if you want to check, it's public to everyone on what we're working on currently. V1.0, nothing has changed. It's our strict breaking change policy. Azure Active Directory extensibility will be available there. All right, and enough of our updates. Sydney, would you like to talk about the Instrument project?
Hey everyone! For those of you who have missed the last few community calls, me and the software interns have been working hard to bring native parameter files to Bicep. So just to give a short overview, we have been building out a new and improved way to define your parameters and link them to a Bicep template file. So last month we demoed syntax highlighting, and in the last month we have made some major progress with parameter completion, a new build command, and improved validation. So I'll post the link to the GitHub story, and you can also probably click on it on the slides here. So if you'd like to give some feedback there or read over our plans for the future, you can see that there. But for now, I'm going to pass it off to Kathy and Mohammed for a short demo.
Okay, I think I'll share my screen. Give me 1 second. Right. So we recorded a demo video for it. So I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna voice over it. All right. Okay. So first, here we have a bunch of Bicep files on the left. You can see, and we have this one Bicep file. We're deploying a storage account, right? And for this, we have 2 parameters: storage account name and location. And there are 2 ways of creating this. There's a traditional way of creating this with the JSON, and there's one we created with our project. So we're going to show the traditional way. For traditional way, you would have to create a JSON file manually like this. So you're going to put them side by side so we know what parameters to create. And you're going to start creating it. So you would have to type the schema.
Hey, Mohammed, sorry to interrupt. Can you zoom in really quickly?
Okay, I'll zoom in.
Okay. Oh,
is that,
sorry, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Is that good enough, Chris?
Let
Perfect.
me make it full screen.
Sorry,
Okay.
nope, that's
Is
fine.
it better?
I just have, yep, perfect. I have old eyes.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so you start creating this JSON manually, all right, and then you have the schema, you have the content version. It does give you some completion, but I will show you one. So as you can see that you don't get completions for identifiers, right? And you would have to manually copy paste the identifier names because you don't want to mistype them. So, and then you would put in the value, all right? And yeah. Now let's say you want to create, you want to also have a value for location, right? So let's say you do that, right? So you create a value for location now, right? And again, you would have to copy paste so you don't mistype the identifier name. And there's no checks if you mistype it. So let's say you give it a wrong type. There's also no checks for that either. But these are the few things you don't get in just by manually creating the JSON on your own, right? So it's a string there, but it's an integer here and it's not telling you anything. So, and this validation would not be done until this file is actually deployed, right? So you want to make sure you do this validation on your computer before you deploy it, right? So we're going to delete this and we're going to recreate this with our new approach, right? So we're going to recreate this in the Bicep Params compiler, all right? So we're going to give it a dot bicep param extension, all right? And this is a dot bicep param file, all right? And this file has to point to a bicep file. So as you can see, there's no using declaration. So you use the using declaration to point it to this bicep file. So it knows that what parameters you need and to do validation for that. So once you point it to the bicep file, as you can see, there were some completions and there was some syntax highlighting. If you point it to the wrong file, it would tell you that, hey, this is the wrong file. And to the right file, it doesn't exist. So we're going to point it to the right file. Now, each parameter file can only have one using declaration. We're going to do another one. And one more thing here is then you do relative path. So you can go back and forth, right? And even go into subfolders. This is just like Bicep experience. So you can go into subfolders as well with modules, right? So, and now as you can see, there can be 2 using declarations. So if it's 2, it's going to complain. It's going to say you can only point to one Bicep file. So we're going to just make it 1.
So now at this point, we can see if we mouse over using, it'll show you that, there's a parameter that's declared on the left, but we don't actually assign it on the right. So let's go ahead and add in that required parameter. And then just now you could see the identifier completion. So there's that little drop down and you can kind of select which parameter you're assigning there. So adding in the required parameter right here. And then in addition, we also have other validations, such as if we define or assign a parameter in the bicep param file, but we don't actually declare it on the left side in the bicep file. So you can see there's an error here. Parameter is assigned, in the Bicep param file without being declared on the left side. And then we also have type checking. So location is declared as a string on the left side, but here you can see if we assign it to an int, it's going to complain about that as well. And so now you can see at the bottom, we're building the param file. So then the JSON file pops up on the left. And then the important thing is just in terms of validations is without the validations, authors won't know that there are issues in their files until they try to deploy. So here on the left, we're deploying our Bicep file and we're specifying our params JSON file. So you can see that happening. And then if you go to that link at the bottom, you can watch, you'll be taken to the Azure console and you can watch your resource get deployed. So once that shows up, and then once you get to the page, so you can see deployment is in progress on the top left there. And then once that's deployed, you'll be able to see the parameters that we actually defined in our Bicep param file. Yep, and that was our demo.
Thanks, Kathy. Does anyone have any comments, questions, anything?
Looks like there are a few questions in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, Chris, would you like to come off
Yeah,
mute and
sure, I'll
ask
fire one.
Chris
So
directly? Yeah.
can you do a using to like a public repo template?
Currently, the support is only for Bicep files, but maybe if there are benefits to that, you might be able to.
Well, it would be
Well-
for a Bicep repo.
Oh, Bicep repo. Okay, public repo. Oh, okay, I know what you. Okay.
As opposed to just referencing a file path.
So it's like a remote file, Chris, not a local file.
Correct.
Okay, so if it's a URI, I think it should work. I think if it's, yeah, I think it should be able to. If you can do that same in module, modules.
So it's using the same syntax as the module reference.
Yes, it's pretty similar.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry,
like
that's
putting this
currently
file in the
that's-
registry as well, the container registry.
Currently, that's not supported. So only local files will be supported in the first release. So for modules, we have dedicated code to download the mode to a local cache, and yeah. But please feel free to open an issue if you think that's something worth adding.
Isn't that kind of the whole point of the public repos? Sorry for the sarcasm, but I know you guys will get to it. I trust you.
Yeah, let's not push right away for gold, Chris.
All right, did that answer your question, Chris?
Absolutely, you guys are doing great. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mikhail, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, so my question is when we are building the Bicep files, so is possible when we are building the Bicep build, it's also possible to, for example, to build the parameters files as well? Because now I see this way. So we create the Bicep parameter files. We need to build this one to parse this to the JSON. After that, we are building the main Bicep that is creating the RM template. And in the end, we have the Bicep deployment, for example, that we need to point that we are using this type of the REM template and this type of the Bicep parameter files that was converted to the JSON. So similar solution, like for example in Terraform, when we have something that we call TF-Worst, so we are declaring that this is using this Bicep file. So when we build, both JSONs are created and both JSONs are used, for example, for the deploy proposals. So is it possible or not?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So currently with this very first version, we are just doing the build command to build a JSON, and then you'll deploy that as you do right now with like a JSON parameters file. In the future, we have heard about TFVARs, and we are considering putting the deployment properties into the parameters file so that you could just deploy straight from there. That is listed as one of the future plans in the GitHub spec. So if you'd like to take a look at that and maybe leave a comment that this is something that you'd like to see, but it is something that we are working on. The next step would be bringing this experience of deploying with the Azure CLI. So obviously this first iteration is a little rougher. It's going to take a couple more steps, but as we continue to build it out, we are trying to come up with ways to make the deployment a lot faster.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I still love this one because I hate JSON. So it's a great job to use the Bicep files. Thank you.
Thanks, Mikhail. Any other questions? You can definitely come off mute and ask directly. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to say we are so proud of our interns. They've done so much work, and we can't wait for them to come back if they choose to. All right, on to Anthony.
All right, let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Is the font size okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it works. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about is Lambda expressions, which was recently introduced into Bicep. Has some dependencies on the ARM deployment backend. So unfortunately, I think we've just missed this Bicep release with it. So it'll be in the next Bicep release, probably the end of August. But perhaps we'll do an early release for it. We'll see. But I just wanted to give you a preview of like how it worked. Take some questions. Get any comments on it. So yeah, this is obviously a bit of a stupid sample. These are some dogs that I know personally. I've created an array, and each dog is represented by an object. We've got my dog called Evie, age 5. These are some of her interests. And then similarly, we've got some other dogs listed here. So this is just purely to give you a sample of like how you might iterate over some basic data that you might come in. So generally what I'm trying to get to with this is just making it easier to work with structured data, giving you some functional programming ability to filter data, to sort data, to map data and things like that. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the operations that I have defined here. So the first is the map function. If you're from a TypeScript, JavaScript background, you probably know this function by name. If you're from a C# background, you might know it as the link select function. But this basically enables me to take an array of a particular format and map each element in that array to an element of a different format. So in this example, I'm taking my doggos array, and for each dog in the doggos array, I'm fetching the name of the dog. So when this map function executes, it's just going to give me a list of names. So it's going to give me Evie, Casper, Indy, and Kira. Do I have any questions at this point? Okay, and I meant to say, actually, feel free to jump in at any point if you do have any questions. Feel free to just interrupt me and interject. I realized I didn't actually really cover this Lambda function itself in much detail. The way to look at this is you've got a item, and then this arrow is you can sort of see it like a function call. So the left-hand side is your variable, the right-hand side is the expression that you want to evaluate with that element. So to give a slightly more complicated example, but still fairly simple, instead of just like printing the name here, we're actually using a string interpolation expression and we're putting the name in. So instead of just giving me a list of dog names, now this is going to give me an array of like this string, essentially. It's going to say, hello, Evie, hello, Casper, hello, Indy. So I can quickly just try and deploy that now and hopefully show you what the output looks like. This might take a bit of time, so I'm just going to keep talking through the other samples while that runs. So that's the map function. The next function we've got is the filter function. Once again, it's taking an array and it's returning an array. If you're from a TypeScript background, JavaScript background, again, you probably know it by the name filter. If you're from a C# background, you might know it as where. So I'm taking my doggos array and I'm defining this lambda here, which basically says, for every dog in the array, only return me the dogs where the age is greater than or equal to 5. So this basically allows me to filter out Casper and Indy and just select Evie and Kira because their ages are greater than or equal to 5. So the output of this is going to basically just be a filtered down, similarly structured to this list, but filtered down. So it looks like my template's been deployed now, so I can just quickly show you what that output looks like. So dog names, as we talked about, we've just selected the names from this data. The order is the same. We're just kind of like manipulating the actual like structure of each element. And then similarly, say hi. Again, we've used our string interpolation expression and we filled it out with the name of the dog. So before I keep going, any questions at this point? All right, on to the next function. We've got the sort function. So this one's pretty self-explanatory, I think. At least the name of it is. We have a list and we want to return a similar list, but in a different sort order. So the way this function works is we have a Lambda function with two variables. I've just called them A and B. I could probably make this a bit easier to read by calling it like dog A and dog B. But essentially we're basically saying as you iterate through the array, compare each element by this criteria on the right-hand side and build up a new array with that sort order, using those criteria to build the sort order. So we expect, once again, a similarly structured array, but we expect these items to then be in the age order. So we'd expect to see Indy first, then Casper, then Evie, then Kira. And if I was, for example, to reverse this condition, I could then reverse the sort order of the array, so we'd expect to see it backwards. And then finally, this one's a little bit more of a niche use case and a bit more of a confusing function, but the reduce function, if you're familiar with TypeScript or JavaScript, you probably know it by reduce. If you're familiar with C#, I think it's called aggregate in C#. So I'm storing this variable of ages. So I'm using the map function once again just to fetch the ages. So this is going to be an array of integers. And I'm passing in this array as my function my argument to the reduce function. I'm starting at 0, and I'm basically saying for every iterate along the array and add all those items together. So I'm doing current plus previous. So for the first iteration, we're going to be doing 0 plus 5. For the second iteration, we're going to be doing 5 plus 3, which is 8. And then we're going to be doing 8 plus 2, 10, 10 plus 8, 18. So it basically allows us to collapse an array down to one item using whatever sort of condition we want. So like I could do, wouldn't make any sense to do this, but I could do current times previous, which would then give me like all of the ages multiplied together. So yeah, that's the reduce function. The final function I want to talk about that's new is the flatten function. This one doesn't actually use any lambdas itself. It basically just allows you to take a multi-dimensional array and collapse it into a single-dimensional array. So we have the interests for each dog. Evie, we've got ball and frisbee. Casper, other dogs. Indy, butter. Don't ask any questions about that one. So basically, we're going to map that to an array of arrays. So with this statement here, we're going to have something that looks a bit like this. What do we have next? Other dogs, etc. So the inner portion of this map statement here is going to look like that. And actually, I'm just going to move it around just to make it a bit easier to read. Let's call it so this variable is going to be in this sort of shape. But really what I want to have is something that looks more like this, because I just want one list. So the flatten function basically allows me to take this array of arrays and just turn it into a single array. Okay, so I'm just going to comment all that stuff out, or remove it all, just redeploy this whole template so we can see the output of these different functions. While that runs, are there any questions? Is the syntax making sense to everyone? Is it confusing? Anything I can explain better?
No, to me it's very intuitive, so you explained it very well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
We have one question. This will be available when?
Yeah, good question. So it's basically being rolled out as we speak. It requires some changes to the actual deployment engine itself. So we have to wait for those to go through. I can't give you an exact date on when that's going to happen, because it's a fairly complex process. But I think it's highly likely. I don't want to say, like, I don't want to promise anything, but I'm 99% sure it's going to be in the next release, which will be end of August. And I think if we have something sooner than then, we may decide to just release this anyway as like a standalone release. But either way, I expect it'll definitely be released by the end of August.
Sounds good. And we have one more question, kind of direct question. What is the use case for this in the real world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I haven't given you a very good real world example here. So I mean, things like the scenarios I think it's useful are, for example, like you have the output of a resource and you might want to, for example, like a VM, you might want to fetch the NICs and you might want to get the non-primary NICs. You might want to fetch the IP addresses for each of those NICs. You might want to then pass that to another module. Or you might want to, I mean, I know a lot of people have, you know, because you don't have this capability in Bicep today, a lot of people will build like transform scripts that prior to their Bicep deployment have a bit of PowerShell that actually goes and takes a JSON file and manipulates it slightly and then passes it in as a parameter. So being able to shift more of that into Bicep and getting some of the Bicep validation, kind of deeper validation of your data is another use case I can think of. Yeah, I mean, just kind of any of these places where you have data in a certain format. I know this can be fairly common when you're taking data from one resource provider and passing it to another resource provider because their API shape may be slightly different. So any of these cases where you have like a list of data and you need to reformat it slightly, pass it to another resource provider, I see it being useful in those sorts of cases.
Does that make sense, Carl? Great. Looks like
Cool.
It makes sense.
All right. It's a good question though. Yeah, so I mean, we can see the values that come back now just to kind of confirm what I was talking through. So this old boys, we filtered our list down and we've now just got the two dogs with age greater than or equal to 5. Doggers by age. This is our sorted array, so we just see that it's now sorted. 2, 3, 5, 8. The total age, we've basically just summed them all, so it's 18 if you sum these all the values. What else do we have? Yeah, and then finally interests. So you can now see this is a flattened array where we've just taken all of the data and combined it into one array. And some of you may know that you can do this with the concat function, but the big limitation with the concat function is you can't pass a multi-dimensional, like you can't pass an array of arbitrary length. You have to know what each of the different values is going to be. So it would work in this case if I wanted to write something like this. I could write cat. Like I could do the same thing by specifying the index to each dog. But when you're dealing with data that is like arbitrarily long, like if you don't know how many dogs there are going to be, then it's kind of useful in that case. Okay, so that's the kind of basic demo of the functionality. I did want to talk through some of the limitations because there are some limitations to be aware of here. The first thing is we're very specific about where lambdas can be used. We essentially, there are 4 functions supported today that take lambdas, and what you really need to know is lambdas. You can only use a lambda in the parameter of that function. So you can't just define a lambda arbitrarily and assign it to a variable. Like this might be something we want to unlock in the future, but it doesn't work as of today. So you can only use this lambda directly in the map function. The next one, this is like a fairly big drawback, I think, and I think there are probably things we can do to make some improvements here, to probably try and unblock some common use cases. But in the case where you have a list of resources, where you have a loop, for example, I think scenarios like this are going to be pretty useful, where you want to for every resource in this list, you want to access some common property on them and join it into an array. This, unfortunately, because this resource list is considered a runtime value, as of today, we have to be able to evaluate the whole deployment graph at the very beginning of the deployment to actually be able to do some of the analysis. And unfortunately, because this is depending on a runtime value, we lose that ability. So unfortunately, like iterating over a list of arrays with a map is not supported. It's not a general block on runtime values. You can do things like this. So you can iterate over properties on a particular resource. It's just this use of a runtime index inside the resource is not supported.
We have some questions in chat. I'm not sure if they're fully answered, but can you flatten an array to a comma separated string, and does flatten skip multiples of the same value?
Yeah, so array to comma separated string, that's actually another recent thing that we added. So you can do, there's now the join function, which was added, I think, in the last Bicep release. So you can do that. Oops, let's be string. So you can use the join function to build a comma separated list.
Yes, and I think that Johnny actually said that in chat,
Oh,
so thanks, Johnny. Does flatten skip multiples of the same value?
That is a good question. I don't think it does. I don't think it makes any sort of assumptions about your data. I know that there has been I think people have asked for the distinct function for some time. I don't think we support it. So that might be something to ask like ask for, I think, because you could, I mean, I think we want to give people the option. So I think if we were to just combine by default with the flatten function, I think that might close off some use cases. So for me, my preference would probably be to have a distinct function, so that you could flatten and then take distinct elements if you wanted to, but that wouldn't be the default behavior. And I know there are some creative workarounds for generating a distinct list today, but I do think we should probably support the distinct function at some point. Any other questions?
I think those are all. Does anyone want to come off mute? Yes.
Anthony, along with kind of removing duplicates, I think like removing nulls would be another interesting scenario to get feedback on.
Yeah. Again, you should be able to build that yourself with the filter function. So I mean, I've never tested this, but you should be able to do, for example, like that should work.
Can you use that on an array? So go from an array to an array that remove nulls?
Yeah. So this is an array, so you can take nulls out.
Oh, no, like, so like a flat array. But yeah, would that be the same thing, right? Not an object array, but like a string array?
Yeah, it would be the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
We also have another important question that I also was wondering, why butter?
Yeah, this is my in-laws dog. He's a bit of a bad dog, and he's constantly trying to steal their butter. He just got into the butter like a couple of days ago. Made himself pretty sick,
But-
so felt like it would be good to represent him here.
That's not bad. That's wide.
Any other questions on this? All right, we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you so much, Anthony, and your haircut looks great.
Thanks.
And I think this next topic, Uche, I think we have some feedback questions from you. I'm not sure if this is sharing. Does anyone see this?
Yep.
Okay.
You're on slide 1 at the moment.
Okay, it's not loading for me, unfortunately. Uche, do you think you could take control? Or let me try doing this again. And I can't hear you. If you're
Hardware
there you
mute
go.
versus Teams mute is a wild beast.
Yes. Okay. I think I got this working for me. Teams, yeah, Teams completely gave me black screen, but there we are.
Awesome. Oh, I did not. I accidentally did not X off that last fourth one. My bad. But
Okay.
y'all get the gist. All right. So what's up, everyone? I wanted to make a couple of announcements and some thank yous before I get into questions. So as Stephanie mentioned, we're working actively. We have an awesome developer team that's working hard on getting Bicep and Visual Studio out to y'all as an out-of-box extension by the end of August. We have some things going on when it comes to Visual Studio's release schedule that we have to take care of. But some of the goodness of Visual Studio has to come out first before we can actually leverage that goodness in the out-of-box Bicep extension. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer, but I think it'll be great for y'all in the long run. Also, Bicep Deploy came out last month, which was flames. Right now, Bicep has grown. It has ballooned to over 15,000 users this month, which is amazing, crazy. From like just January, it was like around 6,000. So it's like doubled. And so I'm really loving that. Y'all are a big reason why. So much help from the community, so much work that y'all put into going crazy on me in the GitHub repository, like giving me all these different proposals and feedback. And so really do appreciate it all. Lastly, when it comes to deploy, we've had over 600 people use it just this past month, making it one of our top used features as a new feature. So that's amazing. Thank you so much. So yeah, these questions are, we have Chris who had already mentioned, gave some answers, but I just wanted to sort of do a poll because I think democracy is a great thing sometimes, most of the time. And so let's go with first, number one, do you want @secure params to be starred out? So this is the scenario, and I'm gonna put in comments that y'all can thumbs up. But before I do, I want to explain the context for y'all. So this is in the case that when you right click on a Bicep file and you say deploy Bicep file, as you're going through it, we have those decorators that you could have put on. You could have put on a specific param. So if you say opt out of either including that parameter in your parameters.json file, or didn't actually put a default value for that secure param, which you likely won't since it's an @secure param, then we're going to ask you about it. So when we ask you about the specific param value when you're deploying, do you want to see that starred out? Or do you want to be able to type it so you can validate it? A limitation of VS Code right now that I haven't quite seen, and please tell me if I'm wrong, there is no like eye icon that you can click to toggle whether you can view the actual raw string to go back to the stars. So we were juggling with this, not knowing if people would feel like, but if I type it in wrong, my deployment fails. You know, if I type the wrong password, my life is over. So it's up to you, but I wanted to just ask right here, yes, please star it out. No, keep as is. So those are the two options here. It's just like, yes, please star out when it's a secure parameter and I'm typing it in my deploy, or nah, keep it as it is. I want to see the raw string. And please do vote. As many people, I'll just give a little bit of time. Okay, we're seeing some comments, some, and this is really helpful, by the way, for y'all, when y'all help me out with this. I know like each community call I come out of nowhere with, help me, but it's really helpful when we have y'all's opinions to build this technology. I mean, at the end of the day, you're the customers, you're using this every day. It's more important what you think than what I think. So yeah, awesome. I think it's a runaway victory for star out at secure parameters right now, unless we have a new wave of people that say no, keep as it is. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's awesome. So now we have the second question. We had a user recently just talking to us. We're getting a lot of awesome feedback on deploy because it's a new feature and everyone is starting to use it. So we want to shape it in the way that y'all like the most. I wanted to know, how often do you actually name the deployment? And is that an important aspect to you? Keep in mind that this means that every time you would right-click deploy a Bicep file, so Ryan Yates said we need to be able to reveal it. I do not think that's currently a VS Code feature, but if anyone finds that and can link me to it, please do. But I haven't been able to see a place where you can see it. Any logging console. Okay, well, I'll keep all of these comments in mind and read through them. But lastly, so for number 2, it's like, how often do y'all name your deployments? This is a question that came up because someone said, I really hate that every time I deploy, I see Bicep 11365. And the person said, I really like to tag my deployments with a certain tag, like tag, my name is Uche. So my questions I'm gonna write in here is, I name my deployments never. Name my deployments never, aka I don't care, or somewhat often, all the time. So between those, how often do you find yourself either wanting to name your deployment or naming your deployment? So if it's that you haven't really done it yet, maybe you're a newer Bicep user, just think about how often would you want to name your deployment, and we can go with that as never. I never really want to name it. I always want to name it, or somewhat often. The reason why is because keep in mind, this is something we will ask you in each time you deploy your Bicep file, because there's no other way for us to guess what your deployment is going to be named at the end of it, which is default with PowerShell. Cool. So we could either and so in this case, we have the ability to do placeholder defaults. These placeholder defaults means when we get to the section that says name your Bicep file, the placeholder could be the name of the file, could be just main, or it could be the evaluated name that Azure is going to give you at the end, which would be that Bicep 1123. And it would be highlighted so you can easily backspace and then type out what you want. But yeah, we're just trying to, okay, so here we have a victory leaning the direction of people generally want the ability to at least name their deployment. Is that correct? And if someone has someone vehemently against being able to name your deployment because it would just bog down that one extra dialogue would annoy you, just let me know. Default name. Okay, Kevin Oliver, great point, and Simon, great point as well. Okay, so thank you. Number 2 is good to go. So we'll have some ideas of how we're going to implement it, but I do like what you're saying of folks want that ability to not see Bicep 1, 6, 8, 9, 10 for their deployment each time. We do still provide the link at the bottom. When you deploy, you'll see successful deployment. You can click the link. But as you said, it might be better to have a clean name for it. Awesome. Number 3, So I want to give you a small little demo of generating params file. This is a newer feature that just came out with the deploy. So we want to make sure that we have the right flow for y'all, because we took some assumptions that we want to, and please, anyone that has, for any of these comments that are coming in, please do feel free to thumbs them up, our community. So if you like timestamp deployment or file, any of those, do thumbs those up. So I have an idea of like, oh, people really like this idea, etc. So I'm going to do a little screen share real quick and show you what our current flow is for generate params. And I want to know what y'all think on that. Okay, so boom. So we have generate params file. Do you expect default values to be captured? And so I snatched it. So right now we have main bicep. Let me go ahead and delete this. Delete. Okay, so as you can see in my main bicep file, we have AKS. I commented some things out and kept it really simple to just say app service plan and storage account. You have your parameter of location and app plan name. Now, if I right click and you see this generate params file command, this is what we'll get right now. You'll notice that we see parameters and there is nothing that comes here. The assumption and reason why is because you've already given default values here. So we're assuming that if you already wrote default values in your bicep file, you don't need to declaratively create or say what the values of your param files are. What we propose is that possibly we could make it so that when you right click generate params file, we ask you either two options. First is include default values or don't include default values. That's what ARM does. And what it would do is then you would at least get actual completions here. So right now, as it stands, do you really like this or want to change? So I'm going to ask, I like this. I would want it different, because we have proposals if you guys want it different, but if there's a runaway victory on I like how it is, then we'll keep it. So do we think
I have to admit that this makes it, your example makes it a lot more clearer what you intended with your question. Because for me, at first, I thought it was all about making sure that during logging, you understand where the default values were chosen or where custom values were added through a parameter file or parameter objects. But now to me, it makes more sense to keep the defaults in the code itself, in the Bicep file, instead of copying them over to the parameter file. I hope I explained that correctly. So now it makes sense that the parameter file is empty, because you want to have a visual confirmation that it did fall back to the defaults, which are in your code already.
I see. So would you, this is where it can get a little bit difficult here. So if I go ahead and erase the default for app plan name and hit save, when I generate params file, we now actually see app plan name, and it's given a blank value.
Yes.
So it's like, now this is where that sort of design aspect of like, what are y'all really expecting? What makes more sense to you? Would you, if we give you the option, say, and I'm seeing quite a few answers of option would be nice. So if we give the option of include default values or don't include default values, would that mean you still would actually rather see location and app plan name every single time? Location. Oops.
Oh, like edit without any values to
Yes,
this one.
Exactly. Or do you like that it actually says, well, if you wrote a default already in your Bicep file, we're not even going to bother to add it in your parameters file at all?
I think that depends on the purpose of generating your parameters file. From an automation perspective, like DevOps, I would want to be in full control of what the content is of the generated parameters file. So I would like to have the option with a switch to be able to tell it whether to include the defaults or not. Because now, basically, if I want to differentiate from the defaults that are in the code, then I would have to manually add them to the generated file. So then it makes more sense to have the default copied to the parameter file. So I know all the parameters are in that file, and I just easily, so I have the naming correct, and I only can replace the values if needed.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if they say include defaults, this is a case where you're mentioning, all right, please do give me the exact default values that I typed out, like community call. Oops, community call. But if they say don't include defaults, now this is the issue where I'm wondering, would y'all rather see if user selects, I'm typing into the chat, select don't include defaults. Would you rather see all of the parameters carried over to the param file?
No, only the ones that need to be specified in my case. Because if I want all the parameters copied, then I would definitely fall back to the include defaults option, because that would give me a parameter files with all the parameters in it. And if they have default values, those will be pre-filled. But if I only want to focus on the parameters that I need to specify, then I only want to see those parameters in the parameter file. So then it doesn't make sense to copy over the defaults with an empty value, so to speak.
Awesome. And so Michael, is it Michael or Michael?
Yeah, it's Michael.
Michael.
So my question is about, for example, I'm using sometimes when we create the default value, I'm using unique string. In this case, the unique string is created, for example, based on the subscription, or is created based on the resource groups ID. So when is it possible, for example, to exclude when we use in default value, for example, unique strings? Because in the end, it will be changing when we use, for example, resource groups over subscription. I don't know. It's some kind of idea why we like to exclude, for example, this kind of generated parameters.
So to answer your question, to go to your question, right now for any of these evaluated expressions, we can't evaluate it because it would give you the wrong answer. So at first we thought maybe Control-C, if I put in this is actually would literally be the string resource group parentheses location. And that wouldn't actually, when you deploy it, you'll be really upset because it's not going to be the evaluated value that you want. We have a limitation of not being able to do that. So what we did was we opted to make it so that that's what led us to opt to make it so that if you put anything on the opposite, on the right side of the equal sign, we just don't even include it in the params file. But we're seeing feedback where people would actually want a little bit more. They want either what we're mentioning here, like either don't carry it over, which we're seeing some thumbs up at all. If you put anything to the right side, don't carry it over. Or we're seeing, hey, can you carry it over and pre-fill it actually? That would be really great. And in the case of this, an evaluated expression, we have the option of either don't carry it over or carry it over, but make it a blank value. And so, yeah, you see how like the matrix gets a little bit wide. It's like difficult because we're trying to mold it around what y'all's use cases, but we also have certain problems in some of these specific scenarios.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's some kind of idea. And so can we, for example, exclude if it's a function, because resource groups location is a function, it's basically it doesn't matter when we generate this parameter. So we only include its, for example, strings or integers on array include the dedicated data, not the function. I don't know. Idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Would you mind writing that in, down below? Because we like put all these together, but yeah, just food for thought. It's basically shaping how we're gonna try to improve the generate params function, which also is the same flow as when you right-click deploy a Bicep file. It'll ask you, do you want to update? And so we're trying to make that the exact same logic and functionality. Someone had their hand up, Keith, I think it was, or Kevin. Let me see. Kevin, Oliver.
Yeah, Kevin. Sorry. Yeah, I just a little feedback. You know, as I'm writing templates for customers, being able to generate or build out that parameter file and then generate the parameter file based on that is nice. Even if it carries over the variables and the values that are in there, even if it's a function that's being called, just so that they know every parameter that's available to them. Is really nice. I mean, I don't want them to have to go and hunt down into the different Bicep files to see the different parameters that they may or may not have to create that don't exist in the parameter file just because there's a default value. You know, for me, as we're deploying things, having all those options available in the parameter file is good.
Okay.
If it's a function, maybe it gets replaced with something else, like you know, insert location value here or something, since we can't carry that across, or maybe that's just you carry it across as a string and you let them know that, yep, this is something you have to change to an actual value.
I see. So in your mind, you'd rather see, like, especially if you have like, I don't know, if you have like a bunch of these, what is it? Alt shift down. If you have like a bunch of these, you would rather, when you right click generate, all of these with all these different names gets popped up here, and you would rather delete it in certain places if it's not necessary versus not get them because they have stuff on the right side of the equal sign.
I would rather see it be more verbose and have to remove the information that's not necessary than have to have them go into the main Bicep file and find it themselves.
Okay.
Your customers,
verbosity is.
Do your customers have an IntelliSense experience when they fill these in, or what editor do they use?
They don't today. I don't think there's any kind of an IntelliSense for the current JSON file.
Oh yeah, there is. The ARM extensions, the ARM tools extension has that. Do you not use that?
I do not. No. Does it let you pull values in from the Bicep file?
Yeah, you know, it shows you the current parameter values, lets you easily create them. I'll add a link.
No, that'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think this rounds up our discussion for now. But yeah, just keep it in mind. And I think we have a couple issues that I'll throw right here in the chat for this sort of feedback and feature. If anyone feels like passionate about it, please do mention exactly how you'd want the sort of generate flow to work. And I'll include these specific scenarios. It's like when there's a evaluated expression, resource group allocation, when there is something to the right side, and when there isn't something to the right side, and how you would expect it to really generate your parameters file. Because right now we're seeing that there's quite a bit of contention and users are feeling different ways about it. And we want to have something that more generally people enjoy and provides you the options to make you successful. But yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Uche. We have one more slide left. I know we're out of time, so if you can't sit through the rest of it, please feel free to drop. But I don't think this will take too long. Oh, 1 second. I accidentally shared the window instead of the PowerPoint. Sometimes I forget to do that. Okay, here we go. And Anthony, if you could please respond to these.
Yeah. Okay. So instead of being able to pass a symbolic resource to a module and or from one module to another, I think we've got the majority of the Bicep code has been checked in. We've just run into some difficulties in terms of handling runtime reference statements that can be generated by outputs. So what we're currently looking at is whether we can prioritize just the parameter support, so the ability to pass a resource in as a parameter and not doing the outputs. But at the same time, we are also looking at what we need to do to get resource outputs working. The complexity there is we can kind of have it working in a way that the deployments engine is kind of unaware of what the value is going to be when it's outputted. The concerns I think we have with that approach is it could have a knock-on impact on what if and its reliability. So we're trying to come up with a solution that's going to kind of work for most people, but in a way that's not going to negatively impact the what if experience. So I think it probably makes sense for us just to give another update on the next community call for this one, to reevaluate where we're currently at. Would anyone find it useful to have just support for resource parameters without the outputs, or would you really want both to be implemented at the same time? Would be a question for the chat. And Stephanie, actually, would you mind putting that question in the chat? And I'll keep talking over the rest. So the question is, should we unblock resources as params first, or should we do both at the same time, resources as params and resources as outputs? Yeah, so the next question, can module output a symbolic resource then be consumed by module Y? So it sounds like we're talking about outputting a resource from one module and using it as a parameter for another module. Yes, that should be supported by this implementation. The second question, can an orchestration file create a resource for a module? Yeah, this should all be possible. Really they should behave the same way as any other param or any other output. You could pass it in from a parent module to a child module. You could pass an output from a child module to a parent module. You can orchestrate in your parent module like the passing of resources from one to another. So this example here sounds like it should be supported once this has been checked in.
We have a hand raised. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't notice that. Ryan, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, on the orchestration file, this is how I used to do on template deployments. I had an orchestration template that would orchestrate the whole deployment of multiple sub-deployments.
Yep.
And that was the only way that you could get things done efficiently.
Yep.
And I think this is the way that we need to be looking to go for.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it sounds like that should be supported if I'm understanding correctly. So the orchestration approach you're talking about, like one submodule being able to deploy a set of resources and then being able to output those and pass them to another submodule.
Yeah. So the example I can use is that you get an IP address for a VM. You want to output that to something else that you can then RDP to that VM.
Yep.
As part of your long-term pipeline. It's part of your orchestration.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think scenarios like that, that's definitely kind of what's motivating us with this feature. So that should certainly be possible. Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Any other questions about this one? Okay, so the next question 2, what is the status of being able to leverage Bicep for Helm or Kubernetes deployments? We're still testing it. I think it's probably going to be part of either the next release or the release after that. So I would say either end August or end September. And here we are we're just targeting Kubernetes deployments. We don't have any support for Helm as of right now. We have talked about it, but we haven't built anything yet. If people are interested in supporting Helm, it would definitely be good to get some feedback, maybe raise an issue for that, and discuss your use case. And then I think the last thing, I think that looks like just a copy and paste of the question on the sub point on question 1, so I'm going to skip that. So hopefully I've answered everything there. And I'm happy to take questions about these things or anything else that's top of mind for people as well, if there's anything that anyone wants to discuss before we wrap up. No, there we go. Slide.
I think we're good.
Yeah. So, any general questions from anyone in the audience? Things that you want to discuss?
Yes, if I can. So basically, what my clients already was asking past those days, that the Bicep will support provisioning on Azure DevOps, like for example Terraform, because now when we onboard new organization, we can use the Terraform, or we can use, for example, the manual. So we create the Azure DevOps APIs. So the question is in the roadmap, is supporting the Bicep will be supporting provisioning in, for example, for provisioning of the organization and the project in Azure DevOps.
Yeah, good question. It's definitely something we've talked about. I don't think we have anything concrete on the roadmap, so we're still trying to just gauge interest, I think. I believe we have a Bicep issue for it somewhere, so I'll try and dig that up for you and put it in the chat. If I don't find anything, then it's probably worth raising an issue there so that we can collect feedback from other people. Yeah, one thing that's definitely of interest there is like the actual specific scenario you're after, like what it is you're trying to provision with Azure DevOps. So any context you can share in the issue would be useful to help us.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I can deliver. So if you send me the link, if you pass in the chat the story, I can get feedback, for example, from my clients, like I don't know, provisioning new projects, organization, because Azure DevOps is now supporting the multiple organization based on the tenant level. So, for example, provisioning new organization and sub-organization provisioning the projects. After the projects, creating, for example, the service connection strings to different subscriptions, different service resources, etc. So yeah, we have few clients that was asking about this one because the Terraform is supporting.
Yeah, makes sense. I think I put a link in the chat. I think that's the right issue to mention. So yeah, it would be good if you could just put a quick write-up of the sort of like resources you're interested in interacting with and the sort of scenarios that you'd want to be supported. Sure. And if anyone else is interested in this as well, definitely feel free to give it a thumbs up as well.
Okay, I'll try to collect all those information passed on the story. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we are 10 over. If you have any other questions, you could either put them in chat or make an issue in GitHub, or during the next community call, ask it there. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone for showing up, for supporting our interns. We really appreciate you all. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a nice one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.